There is a specific, isolating kind of grief reserved for the person who is entirely absent when disaster strikes. It is the grief of the oblivious, the one who is somewhere else, relaxed and completely unaware, while catastrophe systematically dismantled the place and the people they loved most. This was the position Bharata found himself in. For weeks, he had been resting peacefully at his maternal grandfather's estate in Kekaya. That peace shattered when royal messengers arrived from his home. Their instructions were deliberately vague, offering no specific details about what had occurred, but their tone was terrifyingly urgent. Bharata immediately initiated a relentless, panicking 7-day sprint back to Ayodhya. He pushed the pace so aggressively, he was forced to leave his protective detail, his companions, and his royal gifts miles behind him on the road. The 7 days of travel were a trial of agonizing tension. Every mile brought him closer to a truth he couldn't see, forcing him to populate the silence with his own rising terrors. When he finally breached the city limits, the environment itself confirmed his fears. Look at this vast riverbank city of Ayodhya. Normally the wealthiest, most vibrant capital of the ancient world, its streets were now entirely stripped of light and energy. The heavy stillness hanging over these dense temple complexes communicated an unspoken collective trauma. Ayodhya was in mourning, and Bharata felt the chill of that reality before a single citizen spoke a word to him. Seeking answers, he rushed immediately to the center of the palace, his father's royal chambers. The walls, the attendants, the rich furnishings were all exactly where they belonged, but the throne was vacant. The organizing presence of King Dasharatha was completely gone. That empty room marked the exact threshold of his nightmare. The vague, restless anxiety of his long journey instantly calcified into the visceral, horrifying certainty that his world had been permanently broken. Desperate for a familiar anchor, Bharata sprinted to the apartments of his mother, Queen Kaikeyi. The dissonance of her reaction was horrifying. She sprang from her golden seat and embraced him with a joyful, triumphant welcome that completely ignored the heavy doom suffocating the rest of the palace. Kaikeyi was operating under a massive psychological delusion. Blinded by her own political machinations, she casually delivered the news of King Dasharatha's death as if she were handing her son a magnificent gift. Bharata's reaction contains zero heroic posturing. Upon hearing that his father was dead, the mighty prince's legs simply gave out. He raised his arms, cried out in anguish, and collapsed directly onto the stone floor. His lament centered on the hyper-specific physical loss of a father. He grieved for the final blessing he would never receive, the hand that would have reached out to wipe the heavy travel dust from his face. And then Kaikeyi delivered the rest of her victory speech. She informed him that his beloved brother Rama had been banished to the forest for 14 years, and casually instructed Bharata to summon the priests and take his newly secured throne. The full scope of the tragedy now stood complete. His father was dead. His brother was exiled. The people he loved most had been destroyed, and the catalyst for every single loss was his own name. Bharata's response was immediate and absolute. Driven by a ruthless moral clarity, he utterly rejected the crown, refusing to accept even a fraction of the power generated by his mother's betrayal. The sheer weight of this trauma initiated a rapid, severe physical deterioration. He stopped eating. He lost his royal radiance, turning gaunt and pale. As you can see here, he discarded his royal silks, wearing tattered bark robes of a forest ascetic and sleeping directly on the dusty earth. This broken figure eventually had to face Kausalya, Rama's exiled mother. She had lost her husband and her son to Kaikeyi's plotting, and she initially confronted Bharata with the raw, bitter fury of a victim staring down the sole political beneficiary of her ruin. But as Kausalya spoke, she actually looked at him. She observed his starvation, his matted hair, and his genuine, uncontrollable weeping. Her anger completely dissolved. In a profound gesture of maternal recognition, she reached out and pulled the grieving boy's head directly into her lap. Bharata did not have to give calculated political speeches to prove he had no part in the conspiracy. The unfakeable physical reality of his deterioration, the way grief had literally eaten away his body, was the only proof Kausalya and the rest of the traumatized kingdom required. Before Bharata could address the stolen throne, he faced a grim reality of ancient succession. Dasharatha's body was preserved in vats of oil by the royal court, awaiting the arrival of a legitimate heir to execute the required cremation rites. This meant Bharata had to undertake a grueling ritual alone. Here, along the ancient riverbank steps, he collected the mortal remains. A tragic irony haunts this setting. Rama later wept over missing these rites, yet Bharata performed every chant burdened by the conspiracy that placed him there. It was the final, agonizing act of filial duty, a necessary closure granted to him strictly through the cruel mechanics of his mother's betrayal. Ancient geopolitical conventions dictated a strict protocol for this exact scenario. When a prince is banished, he serves his term in the wild. The remaining heir takes the crown, maintains order, and governs the capital. Bharata dismantled that protocol. He refused to govern. He refused to let time normalize his mother's actions. He refused to even stay inside the capital. Look at the logistics of his response. He mobilized the entire structural weight of the civilization. Thousands of military guards, the high ministers, and vast swaths of ordinary citizens abandoned the central capital hub, pushing outwards into unmapped wilderness to find an exiled man. At the very front of this massive procession was Bharata. Stripped of his royal silks, emaciated and exhausted, he led his people away from safety and directly toward the treacherous mountain of Chitrakoot. Through sheer moral force, Bharata took a story designed around political betrayal and forced it into an epic of restitution. He walked into the deep forest with one resolution. He would not stop marching until he looked Rama in the eye and brought him home.